Welcome to the American Diversity Report podcasts, where we interview change makers and diverse innovators. I'm Deborah Levine, your host and editor-in-chief of the American Diversity Report. And with me today, you're going to love this, is Todd Cherches.
Cherches.
Todd Cherches. I love it. He is the CEO and co-founder of Big Blue Gumball, a New York City-based leadership consulting and executive coaching firm, as well as the author of Visual Leadership, Leveraging the Power of Visual Thinking in Leadership and in Life. Welcome, Todd.
Deborah, thank you. It's great being with you.
Oh, a pleasure to see you again. We have talked in the past, and it's been wonderful. And now we get to share this with our readers.
That's great.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into this area of expertise.
Sure. Well, I talk about it in my TED Talk, which I did a couple of years ago, that when people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? When I was like 5 years old, I would say, I want to be Superman. I always had my mother's dish towel wrapped around, flying around the apartment. And people would say, well, if you can't be Superman, what other job would you want? What's your backup plan? And I would say, then I want to be Batman. So as a kid, those were my two career options. So I realized as I got older that was not possible. But the next best thing was to work in the TV industry in some capacity. I just loved television. As a baby boomer, I just grew up watching so many hours of television, reruns of I Love Lucy up through, whatever was on the air. So everything I did was geared towards eventually working in the TV industry in some capacity. And I was an extreme introvert, and I know you are as well. And I always said I'm a 3Bs kind of guy. I'm a back of the room, behind the scenes bookworm. Those are my 3Bs. By nature, that's who I am, and that's who I always was for many years. So I never in a million years ever thought I would be doing a TEDx talk, teaching at NYU in Columbia, and doing podcasts. I've done about 50 or 60 since my book came out last year. So even us introverts can push ourselves out of our shells and speak in public. So but I was always a big reader. One of the things I got hooked on Shakespeare because of Mr. Patterson in 10th grade, and I read the complete works of Shakespeare by the time I was 18. So by the time I graduated from high school, I had read all 37 plays, 154 sonnets, and 4 poems. So everything I did was around reading and or television. And the common theme was storytelling, right? Stories have beginnings, middles, and ends. Stories have victims, villains, and heroes. There's an obstacle, there's a quest. Right, so there's a journey. So everything I do was based around that. And then the work I do now as an executive coach and as a teacher and as a trainer is about helping people on their journeys, right? Everyone is on their own leadership journey. As a team, you're on a collective journey. But so that's my job, is to help people become their best selves and to succeed along their path. So that's kind of like the common theme is between television, literature, and my work. And I worked a number of years in the TV industry. So after graduating from college with my master's degree in communication from the State University of New York at Albany, I worked at Ogilvy and Mather Advertising for a year. And I wanted to work in a creative job, but the only job I could get was in the media buying division, which was a great foot in the door, but a really bad fit for me. And it was not. So after a year of doing that and being miserable, I took my 1 week of vacation and I went out to LA to visit my college roommate, and I saw that Hollywood sign and I'm like, this is where I belong. So I packed my bags and my cape and I flew out to LA, and I thought I'd be there for a few years, and I ended up being out there for 10 years, working in a variety of jobs in the TV industry and then eventually in the theme park business. And then I moved back to New York after 10 years in LA, and then I got into, just by accident, into management training, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So that's my career in a nutshell. In fact, we'll talk about visuals, but this is a copy of my visual bio. So this is the story I just told you. When I walk on the last session of my NYU class, I take my students through my whole career path. I tell them the whole story about the one I just told you. And they love it because they love hearing about not only the successes, but the failures, all the horrible bosses, all the layoffs and the firings, and everything else we all go through in our careers before we end up wherever we're going to end up.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just curious, when you did work for television, was it just in marketing, or did you finally end up doing anything else?
No, when I first moved out to LA, I had no job and no prospects and no connections. So I just needed any job. So I started temping in different places. And first of all, I worked at nights as a bouncer in a nightclub. So I was the door host and bouncer because I just needed a survival job just to pay I actually applied for a job as a waiter, which I had never done before. Again, totally outside of my introvert comfort zone. But they said, because I'm 6'4", they said, you're tall and you'd probably look good in a suit. Can you stand by the door and just check IDs? And, so that was my job at night. And that's how I paid the bills for a while. But my very first job out there in the TV industry or in the entertainment industry was working for Michael Nesmith of the Monkees. So most of my millennial students who have no idea who that is, but us baby boomers, no, they were like the American Beatles for a while, right? So that was amazing. And then I did that for a while. Then I was at Aaron Spelling, just putting scripts together, working on Dynasty. But it was just great to be on the lot, and you're sitting there and Linda Evans walks in or Joan Collins, and it's just surreal, like the TV world and real life collide. But my first real job after those jobs, those were both in temp type jobs. I got a job in casting at Columbia Pictures Television, just typing up contracts. But again, amazing to be on the Columbia Pictures lot and everything.
Sure.
And then I got laid off from there because of the writer's strike, and I got a job at Disney. And that was finally my dream job. I worked as an assistant to a writer producer coming up with ideas for sitcoms. And it was just such an amazing job that only lasted a year because his development deal ended. It wasn't renewed. And I was once again out of work. Then I got a job at CBS working for a manager of drama program development, which was another great job, except for she was the worst boss who's ever set foot on this planet. One of the stories I tell in my book is the day she threw a box of pens at my head because they were the wrong ones. She wanted the medium point, and these were the fine point. So I had a lot of those psycho Hollywood experiences out there, and say I could write a whole book about it, and I did. So a lot of the stories in my book. So my book is dedicated first to my wife, secondly to my parents, and thirdly to all the horrible bosses without whom my career would never have been possible. So,
And this is the book behind you, Visual
yes.
Leadership.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, you certainly have run the gamut, have you not? I'm talking about visuals. I'm still trying to picture you 6'4" in a suit playing a bouncer, right, at a nightclub.
Yeah.
I may never lose that picture.
Well, one thing, I was checking IDs, and I met my girlfriend at the time. We were only together for like 3 years, but I met her checking IDs at the door. Also, a lot of famous people came into the club, like Darryl Strawberry, who played baseball for the Mets. He came in one night, and he's taller than me. He's 6'6", so he made me feel short. But it was a great experience. It's interesting, just seriously, as an introvert, when I would go to this club, I was like a wallflower. I would never talk to anyone, but you put someone in a suit, give them a clipboard and a little authority, and it totally, all of a sudden I was playing the role of this door host, and I was so much more comfortable talking to people, engaging with people. So that's an interesting thing. And it's similar now. I am much more comfortable in front of the room when I'm teaching or training than I am when I'm in the room sitting as a participant, where I feel awkward and uncomfortable, and maybe they'll call on me or they won't. So it's, you flash back to your old junior high school and high school self when you put yourself in that role. So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon.
Yes, indeed. Wow, it makes me think of since I'm very much an introvert,
Yeah.
Of how I came out of it and put the suit on,
Yeah.
and took a different role. And that's a lot of what you teach, isn't it?
Yeah. You still have a little bit, we have that imposter syndrome. Like, is this really me playing this part? Like, a lot of times I'm standing up on a stage or in front of a class. I'm teaching at Columbia. I'm like, who am I to be teaching at Columbia? One of the things I do an exercise in my NYU class where all my students have to speak within the first 10 minutes. And I tell them that you have all just spoken more than I spoke in class in all my years of junior high school, college, and graduate school. I never once spoke. I never stood up in front of a room and spoke. I never had to. And I was always terrified of it and felt I was terrible at it. And I did everything possible to avoid it. So I just, people always find it hard to believe I'm an introvert because I talk loud and fast, but that's just because I'm a New Yorker. So I'm still, that's how I explain it.
Well, having spent a decade or so in New York, I understand.
Yes.
It's just the culture.
It's the pace. It's the culture and the pace. If you don't move fast and talk fast, you just get steamrolled over. So I
Too
learned
much.
how to do that to survive.
You're gonna have to come visit me here in the South to see how it goes with the
Yeah.
slow.
I don't know if I could slow down that much, but I would try. In fact, when I lived in LA, I had to slow down my pace a little bit, although there were a lot of New Yorkers and East Coasters in LA. So it's like, yeah, but
Yeah.
one time I was doing a workshop in Minnesota and this woman raised her hand and said, Todd, can I ask you a favor, hon? Can you slow down? You're really stressing me out and my heart is pounding because you're talking so fast. So I actually had to force myself to slow. In fact, my wife gave me this. Talk about visuals. My wife gave me this seashell, which represents a snail shell, to remind me to talk a little slower. It doesn't work, but I keep it here anyway.
I love it. I love it. Oh, so let's talk a little bit more about this book
Sure.
and how you've come to help people, given all that you know, you've learned often the hard way.
Yeah.
And what's in the book?
Sure. So the book Visual Leadership, and I have a few right behind me, as you can tell. People say, are you in a Barnes and Noble? I'm like, no, this is my office. I may open like a little coffee station right over here when the pandemic is over. But visual leadership, if you look at the word, I actually got the trademark, the registered service mark. So it's now a patented word, visual leadership. Even though the patent office rejected it twice, the third time they approved it. The idea behind the single word, one, it's my brand, but also it represents the fact that who you are and how you lead are inseparable from the lens through which you see the world, right? So if you talk about as a leader, we always talk about what is your vision, or so-and-so, Steve Jobs, or Elon Musk, or Richard Branson. They're visionary leaders, right? What does that mean to have a leadership vision? It's about having a picture in your mind's eye, which is a term coined by Shakespeare in Hamlet when he saw the ghost of his father, and he didn't know if it was an apparition or a figment of his imagination, right? So when we see something in our mind's eye, we're not seeing it with our physical eye, but it's the same sensation. We can actually visualize it. And that's when we talk about having a leadership vision. Leaders have a picture of the future that is different from and better than the current reality. For example, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech was not, I have a business plan, I have an Excel spreadsheet, right? It was a vision, it was a picture of a better future, a better world. So we're talking about having a leadership vision. It's two components. One is formulating that vision in our mind's eye, and the second component is communicating that vision in a clear, compelling, and inspiring way to get that vision out of your head and into other people's heads. Because one of my mantras is, how do you get people to see what you're saying? How do you get an idea, a vision, a picture out of your head? And I have this quote that I keep on my desk by Bernard Baruch, who said that the ability to express an idea is as important as the idea itself. Right? So if we can't communicate it effectively, then we can't get other people on board with it. So that's the foundation of visual leadership, is about having a vision, creating a vision, and making that vision a reality. So that's the foundation, and everything I talk about in my book will help us to achieve that.
Excellent, excellent. I'm sure that there are people out there, as you speak, are thinking, what is my vision? Can I articulate it? What would I do? Who would I say it to?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of that audience.
When you say this, what do you want? I remember my father, when he was 75, he would say, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Right. So it's like he was kidding around, but it's like we're constantly growing and learning and developing. And so what's your picture of where, if everything stayed the same 6 months, a year from now, 5 years from now, would you be happy? Most of us wouldn't. We have a picture of something better or different. And so if you don't picture it, how is it? It's probably not going to become a reality. And I was just reminded as I was talking of the quote from Alice in Wonderland, where she's lost and she says, which way should I go? And then he says, I think it's the Cheshire Cat who says, where are you trying to get to? And she says, it doesn't really matter. And then he says, well, then it doesn't really matter which way you go, right? So if you don't care where you're going, then you'll flounder around, but you may never get where you want to get to or where you need to get to. So a big part of it is getting clear on that vision and who you want to be and where you want to be in the future.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I already am thinking of my homework here.
Yeah, my NYU class, we were recently talking about diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity. And it's like, what does that look like? It's one thing to make it when we talk about like a check the box kind of thing, but if you really want to change reality when it comes to hiring, when it comes to a vision of what does our leadership team look like, or our board of directors. We want it to be different and more diverse. We need to visualize what that looks like. Otherwise, it's just random. It's like, what does an ideal or a better version of ourselves look like in the future? And then what steps do we need to take? So you need to have a vision. You need to have a strategy that will get you to that vision. And then you need to have an execution plan that's an actual step-by-step reality of, so what do we actually do now, right? What steps do we take? What needs to change? And then one of my mantras is who's doing what by when. On any team or even as an individual, you need to be clear about who's doing what by when, and collectively you can achieve that vision.
We're very much alike on that.
Yes. And know your audience. I know, that's a big topic, is, making, thinking in terms of that's one of the other originally, and I wrote about this in my blog post that I did for the American Diversity Report. I talk about the rainbow eye and flipping the eye. So if you look at the cover of my book, it's a rainbow colored eye that no one in the world has this color eye. And this represents the fact that no one in the world sees the world exactly as you do, right? So originally I was gonna have a blue eye because I love blue, and my company is called Big Blue Gumball, so for consistency. But then I realized how non-inclusive a blue eye would be. Even though I don't have blue eyes, it would not be inclusive. So the rainbow eye represents diversity and inclusion in all its forms, as well as innovation and creativity, and reminds us that we need to use all the crayon colors in the crayon box, right? Or, I have this on my desk for all my drawing activities, right? We need to use all the colors of the rainbow to paint a picture of a better world. And so that's the concept of the rainbow eye. And the idea of flipping the eye is you need to turn that eye on yourself and look internally at your biases, assumptions, belief systems, prejudices, and realize that other people do not see the world through the same lens that you do. And part of our mission as a leader is to help other people realize their visions and help to make their visions a reality. So it's not, even though with leadership, we're always talking about what's your vision, it's really not about you. It's really about making the world a better place through and with other people. And we can only do that if we help other people make their visions a reality. So those are some of the key concepts just from the cover, right? So you can talk about, and it's also in leadership and in life. So a lot of times people will say, oh, it's a management book, but it really isn't. It's a book about life. It applies to everyone, because even if you don't work, or even if, regardless of what you do, you need to lead your own life, right? You need to be a leader of your own life. So those are some of the key concepts and themes.
And I think all of us at some point, no matter what our job is, are asked to lead, to visualize, to do something.
Yeah.
And to make a difference. And
Yeah.
most of us want to make a difference. The question is, can you visualize how you'd like to do that?
Yeah. And that's a big thing in my classes. I'll ask my students the trick question, just for curiosity, how many people here are leaders? And like no one raises their hand. And what I say is, by the end of tonight's session, you're all going to be raising your hand, because we're going to redefine what it means to be a leader. And when you do that, it's not about a title. It's not about being empowered. It's about empowering yourself to step up to leadership and have a voice. And I always talk about 3 V's: visibility, voice, and value. Visibility is, are you seen and how are you seen? Voice is, are you heard and how are you heard? And value is, are you making a contribution? And it doesn't take a title to do any of those things. On Zoom, all it takes is turning on your camera and putting on your mic and saying something and making a contribution, and you just contributed in all 3 of those ways. So I think that's a big part of it too, is a lot of times people say, oh, I haven't been, that hasn't been bestowed on me, or I haven't been given that power. It's like, take the power, right?
Yeah, and in this COVID era, where we're on Zoom so much, and the visuals are there, okay, it really matters how you want to present yourself. How you want people to see you. If you don't have any idea of that, you just kind of go invisible, right?
Yeah. And there's a great video by Derek Sivers called The First Follower. And it's out of a music festival. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where one guy gets up and starts dancing, and then like wildly and crazily, and then another guy gets up and starts dancing, and then the third one does, and before you realize it, the whole crowd is dancing, right? And the idea behind the first follower is, you don't always have to go first. Sometimes by going second or third, other people will follow you, and that's how a movement is formed, right? So a lot of times people feel like, who am I to step up? But if you find someone who you admire, or someone who's sees things the way you do, or is fighting for a cause that you believe in, you don't have to be first. You can be second, third, or 10th, and you're still leading the people who come after you. So I think just by reframing it in that way, for those introverts who feel like, who am I to, I don't feel comfortable being first. Like even for me in my career, I have my own company now, but for a long time, I always felt more comfortable being a second, a right-hand person to someone than I did being that lead person. That's just but give me that second spot and I fly, right?
Yes, I know that one.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's a lot to be said for being in the second spot. You
yeah,
actually have more power than you realize.
yeah,
And so when it comes time to take the first spot, right? You've got the experience,
yeah,
the know-how,
yeah,
right? The
yeah,
network.
exactly. Yeah,
So if you're not ready to be number one, be number two and go for it.
yeah, yeah. A co-pilot is still a pilot, right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
just not the lead at that time, but you can be eventually. So that's great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when you use the visual imagery to inspire people to move forward like this, right? What kind of language do you use? The metaphors, and how do you do this? How do you
Yeah.
inspire them to get going?
Yeah. Well, even just the analogy we just used, a co-pilot is still a pilot, right? You could actually picture a co-pilot and sitting next to the pilot, right? So I just used a visual image and a metaphor to explain what we're talking about, right? So I break it down into 4 categories. Category 1 is using visual imagery and or drawing. So it could be it could be anything that you could see with your eye. So for example, just on my desk, to remind me to always be curious, I have this on my desk, little Curious George here. To remind me to try to be more flexible, I have my Gumby, right? Sometimes I have to bend over backwards to serve my clients, right? So just having so right here, I'm not using PowerPoint slides, but I'm using metaphors, I'm using visual imagery. This thing on my desk reminds me to keep my mind open, because if you open your mind, there's room inside for new ideas. If you're closed-minded, there's no room inside for new ideas, right? So just here, using a few of these props, I use visual imagery to explain abstract concepts. So when you use visual imagery, it makes the intangible tangible, the abstract concrete, and the invisible visible, because you can actually see it in your eye. So, and drawing is a big part of it too. That's a whole separate category, how I use drawing to help people visualize things. In fact, one exercise I do in my classes, I'll say to my students, draw a picture of a leader, right? Very simple thing. What do you think most people draw? 80% draw a middle-aged white male in a suit and tie. So what does that say from a diversity inclusion perspective? And I didn't originate this. There was a New York Times article about this a while back. But just the fact that when you think leader, you picture a middle-aged white male in a suit and tie, like Don Draper or Gregory Peck is the man in the gray flannel suit. If that's your image of the leader, how does that influence your potential to lead, your hiring decisions? So we need to change the imagery and the language to change the reality, right? So that's just one example of how I use drawing and imagery to explain that concept. So category 1 is using imagery. Category 2 is using models and frameworks like a 4-box matrix or a step ladder or some kind of or an organizational chart is a way of, or a map, right? That's a way of visually representing structure or the way pieces fit together. Category 3 is using metaphors and analogies like tip of the iceberg, like the co-pilot example. Life is like a box of chocolates because you don't know what you're going to get from Forrest Gump, right? And then category 4 is using storytelling. So when you tell a story, you're painting a picture with words, you're creating a mental movie in someone else's mind's eye, and then they can visualize what you're talking about. And then I also say extra points for humor. If you can make people smile or laugh, it resonates even more. And why visuals? I talk about in 3 ways, and I mentioned this in my TED Talk: attention, comprehension, and retention. When you use visual imagery or visual language, it captures people's attention and gets them to focus. Like if I'm showing you something, you're going to be looking at it. Comprehension, it increases your understanding because it's like, oh, now I get what I could see it with my own eyes. That's why a picture is worth 1,000 words. And thirdly, retention, our brains are just wired for visual imagery. We remember things if we see it in an image as opposed to just hearing it. So that's in a nutshell, I just gave you like a crash course in why visuals and the power of using visual language and visual imagery.
So now I have to share what I have right next to me. It's a pen with a flamingo on it to remind me of my roots in Bermuda, right? And the Shakespeare play, The Tempest, which was done in Bermuda, and the magic of it. And that's what I want in life.
I love that. I love that. So what's interesting is that's what that flamingo represents to you, but to someone else, it might represent something else. But once you tell that story you just told, I will forever remember that, right? Deborah was from Bermuda, The Tempest, and you connected with me because you know I like Shakespeare. So
Yeah.
so that's a great example of how we connect with others by telling stories or using examples or metaphors that will resonate with them. So that's one of the things I talk about in the book is when you use a metaphor, if you use one that the other person can relate to, it creates clarity. One that doesn't can create confusion. So I may use a baseball analogy because I love baseball and I'm a big Yankee fan. But if I'm talking to someone from the UK, I may use a soccer/football analogy. If I'm talking to someone from Australia, I might use rugby, or someone from India, I might use cricket. So you want to change the metaphor analogy by seeing the world through the lens of the other person, right? So it's about communication is about the other person. It's not about you. So if we want to connect with them, we need to get into their. People are always thinking, why should I care and what's in it for me? So anytime you communicate, it's got to be why will they be interested and how will they benefit? And if you can use the right imagery, metaphors, and stories, you'll connect with the person and you'll get the message across so that they can see what you're saying. But you also want to listen and be able to see what they're saying as well. So that's where that flipping the eye reminds us it's not just about us, it's about the other person and connecting with them.
Wonderful, wonderful. My goodness. Well, it's interesting that when I out of the corner of my eye, when I saw the flamingo, and I remember Bermuda, there was I don't usually explain it by using Shakespeare, but there must have been registering in my brain somewhere unconsciously your passion for Shakespeare, and it just came out.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great example. So that's a reminder that we do this intuitively, but if we're more aware of it, we could do it more intentionally and more strategically. So I think so my book breaks it down into those categories, and every chapter is a story and it has either a literal image or some kind of metaphor or a model, but it reminds us, and the whole idea behind my book is create your own metaphors, create your own models. I'm giving you a lot of examples, but find the ones from your own life that resonate with you, because those are the ones that you're going to be more passionate about and you're going to be more excited to tell your story about. So Bill Nye, the Science Guy, one of the quotes that he has that I always use is, everyone you will ever meet knows something you don't. And I always say that to my students, because a lot of my students feel like, oh, a 25-year-old female from Beijing who's not really worked much, she'll say, oh, I have nothing to share. But I don't know what it's like to be a 25-year-old female from Beijing. I can learn so much from you, right? So if you just empower people, and they'll get over that imposter syndrome of who am I to be sharing this. And it's a big part of is confidence, the confidence to speak up and to speak out. And one of the things I say to leaders, and that's to everyone, is it's not only about leadership storytelling, but it's about leadership story listening. It's about our ability to draw out from other people their stories. And by doing that, it boosts their confidence, it makes them feel valued and valuable, and it elevates them to make them feel like, hey, I do have something to share, I do have something to contribute.
Oh my goodness. It's wonderful to hear this from you, and I know people need it. What are your plans, say, for the next 5 years? What's your visual for your future?
Well, my book just came out last year, actually May 12th of last year. So it's literally, I don't know what today's date is. Today, May 12th?
I believe it is.
It is. So my book literally came out 1 year ago today. So happy anniversary.
Hey.
And that's just coincidental. And I just got my latest sales report as of the first quarter, and I just went over 1,000 copies sold. So that's a big milestone for a first-time author.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So my plan now is to start I did my TEDx talk, which was something on my dream list, and also my book. I just had my first 2 articles published in Inc. magazine, and I was just interviewed in Forbes last week. So I just want to spread the word about visual leadership and help people to be better visual leaders. So I'm going to continue to teach at NYU and Columbia. I've been teaching at NYU I just finished my 10th year, and Columbia is my 7th year. And continue to do more public speaking and panels and interviews like this. And my executive coaching business has really started to pick up after a slow year because of the pandemic. And I'm just training people to become better performers, managers, and leaders and speakers by leveraging the power of visual thinking. So one of my Venn diagram is like, there's so much out there on leadership, and visual thinking is a hot topic, but this is my Venn diagram showing how they interconnect. And very few people are thinking about how they work together. So that's my main job, is to get people to realize that, hey, we're all visual thinkers already. I can help you be even better at it.
Wonderful, wonderful. My goodness. I'm so happy for you that you are getting that visibility, that people are hearing from you, that you're having this opportunity to spread the word. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't talked about?
Well, we talked about a lot. So that's what I would say to people. A lot of times people, well, two things. One is a lot of people suffer from ICD syndrome, which is I can't draw, right? So a lot of times people will think, oh, I can't draw. But if you could play Pictionary or charades, if you can, then it's really about the confidence. When I ask, just like I asked the question about leadership before, when I ask people how many of you could draw, if you ask a group of kindergartners, they all raise their hands, right? But if you ask a group of business professionals, very few do. But we can napkin sketch, we can draw on a whiteboard or a flip chart. And it's not about a test of your artistic abilities, it's a test of your ability to conceptually, visually represent an idea, so you can get it out of your head and into a piece of paper or on a screen, so that people can look at it and see it and say, okay, now I understand what you're talking about. And one of the stories I tell in my Inc. article is one of my clients, one of the exercises is the article is called "Can You Draw What Your Company Does?" And they have to get up on a whiteboard and actually draw and then explain what the company does. And what they found when people were doing that is a lot of them didn't understand really what the company did or how they were different from and better than the competitors. So one person drew a big whale and said, we're a whale and our competitors are all goldfish and we're eating them up. And the vice president said, that's not true at all. A lot of our competitors are bigger than us. He said, it's more like we're a dolphin and they're sharks. They're sharks because they're all about getting the sale and biting the customer's arm off and taking off. We're dolphins because we're smarter, we communicate, we're soft and warm and cuddly and friendly. So we had this whole debate about what kind of fish or aquatic mammal they were. But it turned out, then the dolphin became like their symbol. You know, we want to be more dolphin-like as opposed to our competitors who are more shark-like. So just the fact that we did that exercise and had that conversation got them all on the same page in terms of the culture and their behaviors and how they were going to treat people, including each other. So just that one exercise showed that even if you couldn't draw that well, it was a catalyst for this conversation that led to a tremendous outcome. So that's what I would say is, don't limit yourself to, I'm not a leader, or I can't draw, or I'm not a visual thinker. We all are. This is just a skill that you can develop and get better at.
I'm inspired. I'm gonna have to do some drawing here. Absolutely. Audience, you too.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Thank
It gives you tools to move forward that everyone can use. It's just simple but powerful.
Yes, yes.
Thank you again. This is just so special. And audience, thank you for tuning in. And remember, you've got homework here. I hope that maybe you'll come back later this year and tell us how all of this has developed after this first anniversary of your book, and what you're up to. And let's see what the world has for us all in terms of leadership.
Yeah, and no one knows what the post-pandemic world is going to look like, right? So it really is. We each have a picture. I'm writing a blog post right now called the September, Are You Ready for the September Shuffle? Because the idea behind it is we're getting our shots. I think we all want to just relax and enjoy this summer, right? And I think when September hits, I think chaos is going to ensue. A lot of companies are going to call their people back to the office, and a lot of people are going to be like, I'm not going. I'll leave. A lot of people have been treading water for a long time. Things are going to open up and new opportunities are going to come up. People are going to jump ship or take new opportunities. So for leaders, now is the time to start thinking about that and gearing up for that. Not September is too late. So that's what my next blog post is going to be about, is like, are you thinking 4 months ahead? What is your picture of what September post Labor Day looks like? And are you ready for it, and how you're going to prepare for it? So that's something we all need to be thinking about right now.
I'm looking forward to that blog post.
Thank you. I'll make sure to tag you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My goodness. All right, folks, you heard it here. Get ready now.
Yes, now is the time. That is
now
true.
is the time.
Yes.
And again, thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
Deborah.
we'll talk again later to see how this crazy world has turned out in the fall. And in the meantime, best wishes to you.
I just want to mention if people want to connect with me, just
yes,
to go to my website, toddcherches.com. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get my posts as they come out. Also, you could download a list of my top 52 favorite books to help you be a better visual leader. That's free, a free download if you sign up for my website. And also feel free to link in with me. Just say you saw me on Deborah's show, connect with me. And I always like connecting with other people who are fans of Deborah. So I look forward to that. So thank you for having me, Brenda.
Absolutely. Tell us your website name again.
It's my name. It's just www.toddcherches.com.
All right. You heard it here, folks.
Thank you so
We'll
much.
see you soon. A true pleasure. Thanks so much.